The last signal. The morning sun cast long shadows across the crystal fields of Kepler 442b, where the Zephyrian colony had thrived in peace for over 300 years. Commander Thresh stood on the observation deck of the primary defense station, his translucent blue skin shimmering in the early light. The mining operations below hummed with gentle efficiency, extracting precious metals from the planet's rich core without disturbing the delicate ecosystem that had taken millennia to develop. Thresh had never seen a real war. None of his generation had. The Zephyrians were a peaceful race, evolved from aquatic creatures who valued harmony above all else. Their technology focused on healing, building, and understanding rather than destroying. The defense station where he served was more ceremonial than functional, equipped with shields designed to deflect asteroids and communication arrays to maintain contact with distant colonies. Dr. Kira Vex rushed into the command center, her usually calm demeanor replaced by visible panic. Her flowing robes, traditional among Zephyrian scientists, billowed behind her as she approached Thresh's station. The data pad in her hands trembled slightly, displaying readings that made no sense according to everything they understood about their peaceful corner of the galaxy. "Commander, you need to see this immediately," she said, her voice carrying the musical quality typical of her species, but strained with urgency. "Long-range sensors are detecting massive energy signatures approaching our system. The patterns match nothing in our databases but the scale." She paused, struggling to process the information herself. "The scale suggests a fleet larger than anything we've ever recorded." Thresh turned from the window, his large dark eyes reflecting concern. The Zephyrians had always believed their remote location and peaceful nature would protect them from the conflicts that occasionally flared between more aggressive species. Their world offered nothing but minerals that could be found elsewhere, and their people posed no threat to anyone. Who would want to attack them, and why? The main display screen flickered to life, showing a tactical representation of their solar system. Red dots appeared at the edge of sensor range, moving in formation toward their world. As the sensors gathered more data, the number of contacts grew alarmingly. What had started as a few dozen signals expanded to hundreds, then thousands. "This cannot be accurate," Thresh whispered, studying the display. "No single force maintains a fleet of this magnitude. Even the old galactic wars never saw such numbers." Dr. Vex manipulated her datapad, cross-referencing the energy signatures with historical records. Her findings only deepened the mystery and amplified their fear. "Commander, based on the propulsion patterns and energy output, these ships belong to the Drakari Empire, but according to our intelligence, they should be engaged in conflicts 3 sectors away. Why would they come here?" The Drakari Empire had earned a reputation across the galaxy as ruthless conquerors who swept through systems like a plague of metal and fire. They had no interest in negotiation or coexistence. When the Drakari arrived at a world, they offered only 2 choices: submit completely or face total annihilation. Dozens of civilizations had already fallen to their relentless expansion, their unique cultures and technologies absorbed or destroyed according to Drakari needs. Thresh activated the colony-wide communication system, his voice reaching every settlement across the planet's 3 continents. "Citizens of New Zephyr, this is Commander Thresh with an urgent announcement. Long-range sensors have detected an approaching fleet of unknown vessels. As a precautionary measure, all non-essential personnel should move to designated shelter areas immediately. This is not a drill." The response was swift but orderly. Zephyrians had always been a disciplined people, and their society functioned on principles of mutual cooperation. Families gathered their essential belongings and moved toward the underground complexes that had been constructed generations ago as protection against natural disasters. Children looked to their parents with confusion but not panic, trusting in the wisdom of their elders. Within hours, the first Drakari scouts entered the outer atmosphere of Kepler 442b. These vessels, sleek and predatory in design, conducted rapid reconnaissance before transmitting their findings back to the main fleet. The planetary shields, designed for protection against space debris, offered no obstacle to military-grade sensors. Every settlement, every resource deposit, every potential point of resistance was cataloged and analyzed. Admiral Korath commanded the Drakari invasion fleet from his flagship, a massive dreadnought bristling with weapons capable of reducing continents to ash. He studied the tactical reports with satisfaction. The Zephyrians possessed advanced technology in certain areas, particularly medical and environmental sciences that would prove valuable to the Empire. However, their military capabilities appeared virtually non-existent. A peaceful world, Korath mused to his tactical officer. They will break quickly once they understand the futility of resistance. Begin standard occupation protocols. I want all population centers mapped and defensive installations identified, though I doubt they possess anything worthy of the name. The Drakari had perfected their conquest strategy through decades of successful campaigns. Overwhelming force applied at strategic points would shatter any organized resistance within hours. Local leaders would be eliminated or converted to serve imperial interests. Useful technology and resources would be claimed for the Empire, while the surviving population would be relocated to serve as laborers in other conquered territories. Back on the planet's surface, Dr. Vex worked frantically in her laboratory, analyzing every scrap of data about the approaching fleet. The Zephyrian historical archives contained extensive records of galactic politics and military conflicts, information gathered through centuries of peaceful diplomatic contact with dozens of species. As she cross-referenced Drakari tactics with their current situation, a terrible picture emerged. "Commander," she called over the communication link, her voice tight with fear. "I've completed my analysis of Drakari conquest patterns. Based on their historical behavior and the size of this fleet, they intend complete subjugation of our world. Our shields will delay them by perhaps 30 minutes. Our defensive weapons will be ineffective against ships of this class." Thresh closed his eyes, feeling the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders like a physical burden. 300,000 Zephyrians called this world home. Men, women, and children who had built their lives under the assumption that peace was permanent, that their remote location and peaceful nature would protect them from the galaxy's darker impulses. "What about evacuation?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. "Impossible," Dr. Vex replied. "Our transport vessels were designed for intercolony trade, not mass evacuation. Even if we could launch every ship simultaneously, we could save perhaps 5% of the population. The Drakari will be in weapons range within 6 hours." As if responding to her words, the main display updated with new tactical information. The Drakari fleet had split into 3 massive formations, positioning themselves to attack from multiple angles simultaneously. Their ships moved with the precision of a military force that had conquered countless worlds, each vessel knowing exactly its role in the coming destruction. Thresh stood in the center of the command room, surrounded by officers and technicians who looked to him for guidance he could not provide. The Zephyrian military consisted of a few hundred lightly armed security personnel whose primary responsibility was maintaining order during the rare disputes between colonists. They possessed no warships, no orbital defense platforms, no weapons capable of challenging even a single Drakari cruiser. "Sir," one of the communications officers called out, his voice carrying a note of confusion. "I'm detecting an automated activation in the deep archives. Someone or something has accessed the emergency protocols vault." Dr. Vex looked up from her analysis, her eyes widening with sudden understanding. "The old beacon system," she whispered. "It was installed during the original colonization, before we understood how peaceful this region of space would remain. I had forgotten it even existed. Centuries ago, when the first Zephyrian settlers established their colony, they had installed an emergency beacon programmed with the communication protocols of every known spacefaring civilization. The system was designed to automatically activate during planetary emergencies, broadcasting distress signals in hundreds of different languages and formats. As decades passed without incident, the beacon had been forgotten, buried in archives and maintenance schedules. Now, responding to the massive energy signatures of the approaching Drakari fleet, the ancient system had awakened. Deep beneath the planet's surface, in a vault carved from solid rock, electromagnetic transmitters began broadcasting an automated distress call across the galaxy. The message repeated in every known language, following protocols established by long-dead diplomats and engineers. Among those protocols was a signal format that had not been used for over 400 years. It belonged to a species that had once been active in galactic affairs before disappearing into the dark regions beyond the frontier. Most civilizations had forgotten about them entirely, dismissing them as another failed colony venture that had succumbed to the harsh realities of deep space exploration. The signal was transmitted in the ancient emergency frequency once monitored by Earth's children, the humans who had scattered across the galaxy in great generation ships during their species' expansion phase. According to historical records, these colonies had failed or lost contact with their parent civilization decades ago. No one expected an answer to calls transmitted in dead languages to extinct colonies. But in the vast emptiness between stars, something heard. Deep in the outer rim, where ancient human settlements had evolved beyond recognition of their origins, monitoring stations that had operated autonomously for centuries suddenly activated dormant protocols. Artificial intelligences programmed with imperatives older than most galactic civilizations analyzed the incoming distress signal and began implementing response procedures that had never been tested. The message was clear. A peaceful world faced annihilation by aggressive forces, and there were no local powers capable of providing assistance. According to the human protocols embedded in the beacon, such situations demanded immediate and overwhelming response. The safety of innocent civilians superseded all other considerations, including the secrecy that had protected human settlements for generations. Across a dozen hidden systems, human military commanders received automated briefings on the crisis developing at Kepler 442b. Advanced AI systems calculated optimal response strategies, while engineers prepared equipment that had been maintained in readiness for exactly this type of emergency. Ships that had remained hidden in asteroid fields and nebulae began moving toward predetermined rally points. On Kepler 442b, Commander Thresh watched helplessly as the Drakari fleet drew closer to his world. He had no way of knowing that his people's desperate signal had been received, that ancient promises made by a species thought extinct were about to be fulfilled. The Zephyrians prepared to face their doom with what dignity they could maintain, not knowing that help was already on the way. In the depths of space, human vessels began their journey toward the threatened world, carrying technologies and warriors that the galaxy had forgotten existed. The children of Earth were returning to fulfill an oath as old as their civilization, that no peaceful world would face destruction alone while humanity drew breath. The last signal had been sent, and it had been heard. The storm descends. Admiral Korath stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Bloodhammer, watching through the massive viewport as his fleet assumed attack positions around the peaceful world below. 300 Drakari warships formed a perfect sphere around Kepler 442b, their dark hulls bristling with weapons designed to crack planetary shields and reduce cities to rubble. This was how the Empire conquered worlds, with overwhelming force that left no room for hope or resistance. "All ships report ready for orbital bombardment," his tactical officer announced, her scarred face reflecting the cold efficiency that defined Drakari military culture. "Planetary shields are at maximum strength, but our analysis indicates they will collapse within minutes of sustained fire." Korath nodded with satisfaction. The Zephyrians had activated their defensive systems, a gesture as futile as it was predictable. Every species fought back initially, driven by primitive instincts of survival, but reality always prevailed. The Drakari Empire had conquered 47 worlds using identical tactics, and the 48th would fall just as easily. "Begin the assault," he commanded. "Standard doctrine. Eliminate all defensive installations first, then proceed with population suppression. I want complete surrender within 4 hours." The first wave of Drakari plasma cannons lit up the darkness of space, sending streams of superheated energy toward the planet's shields. The protective barrier flared brilliant blue as it absorbed the incoming fire, but the sustained bombardment quickly began taking its toll. Energy readings fluctuated wildly as the shield generators struggled to compensate for the massive power drain. On the planet's surface, Commander Thresh watched the tactical display with growing despair. Each hit from the Drakari weapons sent tremors through the underground bunkers where his people sheltered. The shield generators, never designed for military combat, were failing faster than his worst projections. Emergency power systems kicked in automatically, but they would only delay the inevitable by minutes. "Sir," one of his technicians called out, her voice shaking with fear. "The southern shield grid is showing critical failures. Estimated time to complete collapse is 8 minutes. Dr. Vex continued monitoring her instruments, tracking the ancient beacon signal as it propagated across the galaxy. The transmission had been active for 3 hours now, but she had detected no response, no indication that anyone had received their desperate call for help. Perhaps the old stories were just myths after all. Perhaps humanity had truly vanished into history, leaving only legends and abandoned protocols. The Drakari bombardment intensified, focusing their fire on specific points where the shields showed weakness. Their military doctrine emphasized efficiency above all else. Why waste ammunition on prolonged siege when concentrated firepower could achieve the same result in a fraction of the time? Korath had used this strategy to break the defenses of the Altarian Federation in under 2 hours, and he expected similar results here. Suddenly, the ship's sensor operator called out in confusion. "Admiral, I'm detecting spatial distortions at the edge of the system. The signatures don't match any known drive technology." Korath turned from the viewport, his expression shifting from confidence to suspicion. During his decades of military service, he had learned to trust his instincts, and something about this development felt wrong. The Zephyrians possessed no allies capable of mounting a rescue operation, and no other major power had any strategic interest in this remote system. "Elaborate," he demanded, moving to examine the sensor displays himself. "The distortions appear to be quantum tunnel apertures, but the energy patterns are unlike anything in our databases. They're opening at multiple points simultaneously, suggesting coordinated arrival of something." Before the sensor operator could complete her analysis, space itself began to tear open. Not the gradual emergence typical of conventional faster-than-light travel, but violent rips in reality that appeared with surgical precision. Through these apertures came objects that defied immediate classification, dark, angular shapes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Captain Marcus Chen emerged from the quantum tunnel aboard the stealth frigate Nightfall, his weathered face illuminated by the soft blue glow of his ship's command displays. At 45, he had spent more than half his life preparing for this moment, the day when humanity would answer the call of an ancient oath. His crew moved with practiced efficiency around him, each person understanding their role in what was about to unfold. "Tactical assessment complete," reported Lieutenant Sarah Nova, her fingers dancing across holographic controls as she analyzed the Drakari formation. 300 enemy vessels in standard siege configuration. They're focused on the planet and not watching their flanks. Typical Imperial arrogance. Chen studied the tactical display, noting the positions of enemy ships with the eye of someone who had fought in conflicts the galaxy had forgotten. The Drakari had arranged themselves for maximum firepower against a stationary target, but their formation left them vulnerable to attack from multiple angles. They expected no resistance from space, so they had prepared for none. "Signal the fleet," Chen ordered. "Implement Protocol 7. We go in silent and fast." Across the system, 36 human vessels materialized from quantum tunnels with perfect coordination. Each ship was a masterpiece of stealth technology designed to operate undetected in hostile territory. Their hulls incorporated metamaterials that bent sensor waves around them, while their engines ran so quietly that they registered as background cosmic radiation to most detection systems. The human fleet moved like ghosts through space, approaching the Drakari formation from 6 different vectors simultaneously. Their ships were smaller than the massive Drakari dreadnoughts, but they carried weapons based on principles that most galactic civilizations had never discovered. Quantum torpedoes that could phase through shields, particle beams that operated at near-light speed, and defensive systems that made them nearly impossible to target effectively. Admiral Korath finally noticed the approaching threats when the first human ship decloaked less than 5,000 kilometers from his flagship. The nightfall appeared on his sensors like a phantom materializing from a nightmare, its weapons already charging for attack. Before he could issue orders, alarms began screaming throughout his fleet as more human vessels revealed themselves in perfect attack positions. "How did they get so close?" Korath demanded, his voice carrying a note of panic that his officers had never heard before. "Where did they come from?" His tactical officer scrambled to analyze the new contacts, but her instruments provided confusing data. The human ships seemed to exist in a state of quantum uncertainty, their exact positions shifting constantly as their stealth systems interfered with Drakari sensors. Energy readings suggested technology far more advanced than anything in Imperial databases. "Unknown vessels, identify yourselves," Korath broadcast on all frequencies. "You are interfering with a lawful Imperial operation. Withdraw immediately or face the consequences." The response came not in words but in action. The human fleet opened fire simultaneously, their weapons targeting the Drakari formation with surgical precision. Quantum torpedoes phased through shield matrices to detonate against hull plating, while particle beams carved through armor that had withstood decades of conventional warfare. In the space of 30 seconds, 12 Drakari cruisers were either destroyed or disabled. Captain Chen watched the engagement unfold with grim satisfaction. His crews had trained for centuries to fight enemies exactly like the Drakari, aggressive empires that used superior numbers to overwhelm peaceful civilizations. Human military doctrine had evolved specifically to counter such tactics, emphasizing mobility, stealth, and devastating first strikes. "Target their command structure," he ordered. "Disable their coordination, and they'll fall apart like dominoes." Lieutenant Nova identified the enemy flagship and transmitted targeting data to the fleet. The Bloodhammer was a massive vessel, heavily armored and bristling with weapons, but its size made it a perfect target for coordinated attack. 6 human ships converged on Korath's position, their quantum torpedoes specifically programmed to disrupt the command and control systems that held the Drakari fleet together. Korath felt his mighty flagship shudder under impacts that shouldn't have been possible. His shields were designed to withstand sustained bombardment from entire fleets, yet these unknown weapons passed through them as if they didn't exist. Explosions rippled through the ship's hull as critical systems failed one after another. "Damage report," he shouted over the chaos of alarms and emergency lighting. "Multiple hull breaches on decks 7 through 15, his damage control officer replied. "Command and control networks are failing throughout the ship. We're losing contact with the fleet." The human attack continued with relentless precision. Unlike the Drakari preference for overwhelming firepower, human tactics focused on disrupting enemy capabilities rather than simple destruction. They targeted communication arrays, shield generators, and weapon control systems, leaving Drakari ships alive but helpless to coordinate their response. On Kepler 442b, Dr. Vex stared at her instruments in amazement as the space battle unfolded above them. The mysterious newcomers were systematically dismantling a Drakari fleet that had seemed invincible just minutes before. Their ships moved with a grace and coordination that suggested centuries of military evolution, each vessel perfectly synchronized with its companions. "Commander," she called to Thresh, her voice filled with wonder. "The beacon signal, it worked. Someone answered our call." Thresh joined her at the sensor station, watching as the tactical display updated in real time. The red icons representing Drakari ships were disappearing or changing to yellow as they were disabled. The unknown fleet moved through the enemy formation like sharks among minnows, striking with deadly efficiency before fading back into the darkness of space. "Who are they?" he asked, though part of him already suspected the answer. Before Dr. Vex could respond, a new signal appeared on their communication array. It was transmitted on the same frequency as their emergency beacon, using protocols that were centuries old but unmistakably clear. The voice that emerged from their speakers spoke in the ancient language of Earth, translated automatically by their linguistic computers. "Zephyrian Colony, this is Captain Marcus Chen of the Terran Defense Fleet. We received your distress signal and are responding as per ancient treaty obligations. Please maintain your current position while we complete neutralization of hostile forces." The communication ended, leaving the Zephyrian Command Center in stunned silence. Humans were not extinct legends after all. They had been hiding in the darkness between stars, maintaining their ancient promises, and preparing for the day when peaceful civilizations would need their protection. Above them, the space battle continued with inevitable momentum. The Drakari fleet, designed to intimidate and overwhelm primitive defensive forces, found itself completely outmatched by an enemy that fought according to different rules entirely. Human ships appeared and disappeared like ghosts, striking vital targets before vanishing again into quantum shadows. Admiral Korath watched his mighty fleet crumble around him, his lifetime of military experience rendered useless against tactics he could not understand. The humans fought without honor, without the grand gestures of imperial warfare. They simply appeared, struck, and vanished, leaving only destruction in their wake. Within 2 hours, the Drakari fleet that had threatened to conquer an entire world was reduced to scattered debris and disabled hulks. Those ships that still functioned found their weapons offline, their shields collapsed, and their communication systems jammed. The humans had not sought to destroy their enemies so much as to render them helpless. As the last Drakari resistance ended, Captain Chen opened a channel to the planet below. His face appeared on the main screen in the Zephyrian Command Center, showing features that were unmistakably human, despite the strange armor and advanced technology surrounding him. "Citizens of Kepler 442b, he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had fought in battles across the galaxy. "The immediate threat has been neutralized. However, this attack was part of a larger Imperial campaign. We need to discuss the future security of your world." Commander Thresh stepped forward, representing his people before these mysterious saviors who had emerged from legend to answer their call. "Captain Chen, we are in your debt. How can we ever repay what you have done for us?" Chen's expression softened slightly, revealing the compassion that lay beneath his warrior's exterior. "No debt exists between us, Commander. Long ago, humanity made a promise to defend peaceful worlds against those who would destroy them. Today, we simply kept that promise." The implications of his words sent ripples of excitement and fear throughout the galaxy as news of the engagement spread. Humanity had returned, not as explorers or traders, but as protectors armed with technology that could humble the greatest military powers. The balance of galactic politics was about to shift in ways that no one could predict. The reckoning news of the Drakari defeat spread across the galaxy with the speed of quantum communication networks, carried by automated trading vessels and diplomatic couriers who could scarcely believe the reports they transmitted. Within 48 hours, every major civilization had received detailed accounts of the impossible battle at Kepler 442b. A peaceful colony that should have fallen within hours had not only survived, but watched their attackers suffer complete defeat at the hands of mysterious warriors who claimed to be human. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on the neutral station orbiting Proxima Centauri, their chambers filled with representatives from dozens of species who spoke in hushed whispers about implications they barely understood. Ambassador Yethan of the Crystalline Confederacy stood at the central podium, his translucent form shimmering with nervous energy as he addressed the assembly. "Distinguished colleagues," he began, his voice carrying the harmonic resonance typical of his species. "We face a situation unprecedented in galactic history. A force claiming human origin has demonstrated military capabilities that exceed our most advanced defensive systems. The Drakari Empire, which has conquered 47 worlds in the past century, was defeated by a fleet 1/10 their size." Murmurs of disbelief rippled through the chamber. The assembled ambassadors represented civilizations that had considered themselves the pinnacle of galactic evolution. Their technologies, refined over millennia, had shaped trade routes and political boundaries across hundreds of systems. Yet the battle report suggested that humanity possessed capabilities that made their achievements seem primitive. Ambassador Thess of the Aquarian Union raised one of her flowing appendages, her aquatic features reflecting skepticism and concern. "How do we know these beings are actually human? The species vanished from galactic affairs centuries ago. They could be using human identity as a psychological weapon, exploiting our historical records to create confusion." The question hung in the air like a challenge to everything they thought they understood about their galaxy. Humans had been dismissed as failed colonists, another species that had overextended itself in the Great Expansion and paid the price with extinction. Their settlements had gone silent one by one, their communication networks falling dark until even their home system of Sol became just another entry in archaeological databases. Dr. Kira Vex stood before the council as the primary witness to humanity's return, her Zephyrian features calm despite the magnitude of what she was reporting. She had spent the past week analyzing every piece of data from the battle, confirming details that seemed to defy rational explanation. The invitation to address the Galactic Council was an honor she had never expected, but the responsibility weighed heavily on her shoulders. "Honored representatives," she began, her musical voice carrying clearly through the chamber's acoustic systems. "I have personally examined the quantum signatures of the human vessels. Their technology operates on principles that our science can barely comprehend, but their genetic markers and linguistic patterns match archived human records with perfect accuracy. These are not imposters. They are the children of Earth, returning to fulfill promises their ancestors made centuries ago." The evidence she presented was overwhelming. Quantum resonance patterns that match theoretical human technology from their expansion period. Linguistic analysis showing evolution from ancient Earth languages in ways that could not be faked. Most importantly, cultural behaviors that demonstrated humanity's legendary emphasis on protecting peaceful civilizations against aggressive expansion. General Hayes materialized in the center of the chamber through a holographic projection, his presence causing a stir among the assembled ambassadors. The human commander appeared exactly as described in historical records, bipedal, relatively small compared to most galactic species, but carrying himself with an authority that filled the vast space around him. His uniform bore symbols that matched patterns found in ancient human archaeological sites. "Distinguished members of the Galactic Council," Hayes said, his voice carrying the quiet confidence of someone accustomed to command. "Humanity has observed your civilizations from afar for 4 centuries, watching as peaceful worlds fell to aggressive empires while others stood by and offered diplomatic protests. We withdrew from galactic politics not from weakness, but from disappointment in the direction your societies were taking." The implications of his words sent shockwaves through the assembly. Humanity had not vanished or failed as commonly believed. They had been watching, judging, and preparing for the day when their intervention would be necessary. The archaeological evidence suddenly made sense. Human colonies had not been abandoned, but transformed into hidden bases from which Earth's children could monitor galactic affairs. Ambassador Corvin of the Hegemony, representing one of the galaxy's most militaristic cultures, leaned forward with barely concealed aggression. "You speak of observation and judgment, as if you have the right to pass sentence on our civilizations. What gives humanity the authority to interfere in galactic politics?" Hayes fixed the ambassador with a steady gaze that seemed to peer directly into his soul. "The same authority that allowed your hegemony to stand by while the Drakari enslaved the Myran colonies last year. The same authority that permitted the Council to debate trade sanctions while entire species faced extinction. We claim no authority except that which comes from action when action is needed." The chamber fell silent as the weight of his accusation settled over the assembled representatives. The Galactic Council had indeed failed to prevent numerous atrocities over the past centuries, their diplomatic processes moving too slowly to save worlds under immediate threat. Committee hearings and economic sanctions meant nothing to species facing orbital bombardment and population suppression. Dr. Vex stepped forward to support the human position. "In our darkest hour, when death rained from the sky and our shields collapsed around us, only humanity answered our call. The Galactic Council had received our distress signals hours before the attack began, yet your response was to schedule a committee meeting for next month to discuss appropriate diplomatic measures." The accusation stung because it was true. The Council's bureaucratic processes, designed to prevent hasty decisions that might destabilize galactic politics, had become so cumbersome that they could not respond to genuine emergencies. While committees debated proper procedures, peaceful worlds burned under the weapons of aggressive empires. Admiral Korath appeared via heavily encrypted transmission from the detention facility where the surviving Drakari officers were being held by human forces. His once proud bearing had been replaced by something approaching humility, a transformation that shocked those who knew the Drakari reputation for uncompromising arrogance. "I have fought in 47 successful campaigns," Korath admitted, his voice carrying none of its former authority. "I believe the Empire's military superiority was absolute, that no force in the galaxy could challenge our expansion. In 2 hours, the humans proved that everything I thought I knew about warfare was obsolete." His testimony provided unprecedented insight into the battle from the Drakari perspective. The human fleet had not simply possessed superior technology, they had demonstrated a completely different approach to military strategy. Instead of seeking to dominate through overwhelming force, they had systematically dismantled their enemy's ability to fight while minimizing actual destruction. "They could have annihilated our entire fleet," Korath continued. "Their weapons passed through our shields as if they did not exist. Instead, they disabled our ships and captured our personnel with minimal loss of life. Even toward enemies who had come to destroy innocent civilians, they showed restraint that our culture considers weakness, but which I now recognize as strength. The revelation that humanity possessed the power to destroy entire fleets, but chose mercy instead, sent ripples of both relief and concern through the galactic community. Species that had feared human aggression now wondered if they were being judged, found wanting by standards they did not understand." Captain Chen joined the holographic conference from his flagship, which now orbited Kepler 442b as part of a growing human fleet that had emerged from hidden bases across the galaxy. His presence alongside General Hayes demonstrated that humanity's return was not a single rescue mission, but a coordinated revelation of capabilities they had been developing in secret for centuries. "We have no desire to rule over other species," Chen explained, addressing the Council's unspoken fears about human intentions. "Our goal is simple: to ensure that peaceful civilizations can develop without fear of conquest by aggressive empires. We will not interfere in legitimate conflicts or political disputes, but we will respond to calls for help from those who cannot defend themselves." The human doctrine was elegant in its simplicity, but revolutionary in its implications. For centuries, galactic politics had operated on the principle that might made right, that strong civilizations naturally dominated weaker ones through superior technology and military force. Humanity proposed a different model: that strength should serve as protection for the weak, rather than a tool for their exploitation. Over the following weeks, the effects of humanity's return rippled throughout galactic civilization. The Drakari Empire, facing the prospect of human intervention in their future campaigns, began negotiating with their subject worlds for the first time in their history. Other aggressive powers quietly canceled expansion plans, uncertain whether their actions might trigger human response. The Galactic Council found itself forced to reevaluate its entire approach to peacekeeping and conflict resolution. Diplomatic processes that had taken months or years now faced pressure to produce results before human patience ran out. The threat of intervention by a force that could humble the greatest military powers concentrated minds wonderfully on finding peaceful solutions to disputes. On Kepler 442b, the Zephyrian colony had become a symbol of hope for peaceful species throughout the galaxy. Pilgrims arrived daily to see the world where humanity had returned, where ancient promises had been kept despite centuries of silence. The crystal fields where mining operations had resumed now sparkled with additional beauty, monuments erected by grateful visitors from dozens of worlds. Commander Thresh stood in the same observation deck where he had watched the Drakari fleet approach with such despair, but now he looked up at stars that held new meaning. Human ships patrolled the system openly, their presence serving as both protection and warning to any who might threaten peaceful worlds. The message was clear: the children of Earth had returned, and they would not permit the strong to prey upon the weak. Dr. Vex continued her research into human technology, working alongside scientists from the mysterious fleet to understand capabilities that bordered on the miraculous. The humans shared freely, seeking to elevate galactic civilization, rather than maintain superiority through secrecy. Their approach to science emphasized cooperation over competition, building up rather than tearing down. The ancient beacon that had summoned humanity's aid continued transmitting its automated signal across the galaxy, but now it carried additional meaning. It served as a reminder that help would come to those who needed it, that promises made in good faith would be honored regardless of time or distance. The signal that had once represented desperation now symbolized hope. As months passed, the galaxy settled into a new equilibrium. Aggressive empires found their expansion checked by the possibility of human intervention. Peaceful civilizations began to flourish without fear of conquest. Trade routes that had been disrupted by constant warfare reopened as stability returned to previously volatile regions. The Galactic Council, reformed and revitalized, began working with human representatives to establish new protocols for conflict resolution. The bureaucratic paralysis that had allowed so many atrocities was replaced by streamlined processes designed to provide rapid response to genuine emergencies. The Council had rediscovered its original purpose, protecting the weak from the strong. In the end, humanity's greatest weapon proved to be not their advanced technology or military superiority, but their unwavering commitment to the principle that civilization meant protecting those who could not protect themselves. They had watched from the shadows for centuries, waiting for the moment when their intervention would be both necessary and welcome. The children of Earth had kept their promise, and in doing so, they had reminded the galaxy what it meant to be truly civilized. The stars no longer fell silent when peaceful worlds called for help, because humanity was listening, ready to answer the call whenever hope seemed lost. The age of predatory empires was ending, and the age of protected peace had begun.